Hello and welcome back to Don't Press Play, the podcast where we press play so that you don't have to. Today, we're not heading to Elm Street, we're heading straight to sunny LA, where the real nightmare begins. Yes, Freddy is back, but this time, he's not hiding in your dreams, he's slashing his way into the real world, haunting actors, twisting reality, and corrupting the script itself. That's right, we're talking about Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the king of meta horror and the film that ran so that Scream could sprint. Grab your script, lock your doors, and hold on tight, because this time, staying alive won't keep you alive. Okay, so let's roll the trailers, and I will see you on the other side.
Mark it, common mark.
I'm doing a film about my nightmares as I'm dreaming them. In order for the movie to continue, it was dependent on me having more nightmares. Well, fortunately, I did.
I'm a little frightened by what Wes may have tapped into. I frankly felt that it was over when we did the final nightmare.
In a town where movies go over schedule and directors go over budget, something far more evil is out of control.
Suffered its own terror today as two of Hollywood's best-known special effects technicians were found dead.
Part of the theme of the movie is becoming like part of the making of the movie.
Can you come with me in my dreams?
I think that only happens in the movies.
What happens when the story dies? The evil is set free. Now that the films have ended, the genie's out of the bottle. That's what the nightmares are telling me, and that's what I'm writing.
This is still a script we're talking about, right, Wes?
He's decided to cross over out of films into our reality. The only way to stop him is to make another movie.
Oh, my God.
The bad man's getting awful close.
You're gonna have to make a choice.
What kind of choice?
Whether or not you're willing to play Nancy one last time.
No!
Cut the effect!
Isn't there somebody who can stop him?
That person's you.
Why me?
It was you that gave Nancy her strength.
Nancy. Almost there.
Where's my son?
Okay, so Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. I have such a special relationship with this film. It was not the first Nightmare on Elm Street film that I ever saw, but it was my favorite, especially as a child. I don't know what kind of connected me so much to it, but I remember the first time I watched it, I was probably around 7 or 8, and me and one of my friends who I grew up with, he had all the Nightmare on Elm Street films on DVD, and we religiously, every time there was a sleepover, every time we were hanging out, every day after school, like, we would put Wes Craven's A New Nightmare on, and we would honestly just lose our minds at the script. And I think it's because, I mean, I've always been drawn to like more meta commentaries on horror. Like, Scream is one of my favorite films of all time, obviously, whose isn't? But Wes Craven's New Nightmare, it ran so that Scream could walk, you know? Or is it walk so that Scream could run? Either way, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was kind of revolutionary in that. And I think as a child, seeing Freddy as a real being rather than a fictional being, even though it's still a film, was so much more scary to us. And I have such a vivid memory of us trying to, like, literally gaslight one of our friends to watching the film with us. be like, no, it's not scary. I promise, it's not scary. And then the opening scene where the actor is building the Freddy glove, ran out of the room crying his eyes out. So, this film just has like such nostalgia for me personally, and I think it is my favorite nightmare film. I mean, I do love Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and I said that's my favorite, but I think if I was to choose, I would say that Wes Craven's New Nightmare is my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film, just because of all like the childhood memories, which is so dark to say, but there are so many childhood memories related to this film, and yeah, I think it was my first kind of. I think this was the first film that solidified to me that horror was a genre that I'd fall in love with forever because of how clever and how smart it was. So, yeah, let's just get into it. So, let's talk numbers. So, Wes Craven's New Nightmare hit theaters in 1994, and it's got a runtime of around 112 minutes, I think. It did okay at the box office. It pulled in just under $20 million on an $8 million budget. So, I think critics were pretty split about this, but if you kind of have to think this had never been done before, so I think if this film was released now and given a Halloween 2018 treatment, I think it would be phenomenal and people would be losing their minds over it. However, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was born in a world that was pre-Scream, and Scream changed the genre forever. The genre was never the same after Scream. However, Wes Craven's New Nightmare did it first. I mean, obviously, it was the same guy, Wes Craven, but I don't think we were ready for Wes Craven's New Nightmare when it happened. And you've got to imagine as well, Freddy had been murdered. It was Freddy's dead was a whole thing, Freddy Krueger's dead and gone. And then it comes back, and I think a lot of people were expecting this sequel of An Nightmare on Elm Street, and what we get isn't really a sequel. I mean, strictly speaking, it is a sequel to An Nightmare on Elm Street. However, chronologically in the films, those films are all films. So the actors play themselves, and Heather Langenkamp plays Heather. She doesn't play Nancy, and that's essentially the whole premise of the film. So it's technically not even a sequel. It's a film within a film. So I just don't think we were ready for a New Nightmare. And I think now within its own right, it does have kind of its own cult following. I mean, to be fair, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has, I think, 75%, and it has a 6.4 on IMDb. So it's absolutely not terrible, and it absolutely didn't do bad at all. However, like I said, I don't think that we were ready for Wes Craven's New Nightmare because it's so meta and it's so out there and different, and it's especially nothing that the franchise had seen before. This franchise was very not meta. It was very much, I mean, it was very self-aware, but it was just very cut and dry. Freddy Krueger movie. Whereas this, it is about Freddy, but it's more about Nancy, and we'll get into the plot right now. So the premise of this film is A Nightmare on Elm Street 6 has happened. Freddy is dead and gone, and it's now the 10th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And we meet Heather Langenkamp, who has a child called Dylan, and she has a husband who works in special effects, which is true. In real life, she does have a husband who works in special effects. And we open on a set of a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, and Heather is playing Nancy again. She's dressed up in her pajamas, and her child's on the set, and there is a mechanical Freddy glove that comes to life and murders some people. And she then wakes up to an earthquake. Now, the interesting thing about Wes Craven's New Nightmare is it actually ties in real life events, not just Nancy Thompson and Heather Langenkamp. It deals with her real life stalker that she had after filming. It deals with, her real life of having a husband working in special effects. But it also deals with things like the LA earthquakes that actually happened at the time of filming, and it was written into the script. Now, the premise of this film is that it's been 10 years and Wes Craven is having nightmares again, and his nightmares are about Freddy Krueger and about Nancy Thompson and Heather Langenkamp, and essentially he is starting to realize now that Freddy is this dark, evil entity that was kind of a genie in a bottle that was trapped through the Nightmare and Elm Street movies. And now that the story's been told, Freddy is no longer contained and he is on his way out into the real world. And to get through the real world, he has to take on Heather Langenkamp because she played Nancy in the films and she is the protector of the realm, essentially. And she is what is stopping Freddy from becoming real. Now, concept-wise, like I said before, like, this was never done before. So I just think concept-wise, you have these actors playing themselves in a film where they are trying to, make another Nightmare on Elm Street film, and we meet Robert Englund, who is dressed up as Freddy at one point, but he is still Robert Englund playing Robert Englund, and it's Heather Langenkamp, and no other franchise do we get to see has like the main actor. It's like this would be like a film with Jamie Lee Curtis and Nick Castle, like talking about what films they're going to do next. Like Wes Craven really pulled the curtain back on Hollywood here, and like we see Heather Langenkamp go to the New Line offices and is pitched an offer to be in an Out on Elm Street sequel, and like you can kind of see why this film wasn't as well received when it first came out, because I think I don't know if it's bad to say like horror didn't have that kind of following now, but I just think if this came out today, like I said, fans would be losing their absolute minds. Whereas back then, you've got like Freddy's Dead, which is so like bizarre and weird and all about Freddy Krueger, and then you've got like Heather Langenkamp in a business meeting with Rob Shea, you know. So I just think tone-wise, this film is completely different to anything we've ever seen before, and you can kind of see why people were a bit not miffed, but a bit, things are a bit different here. So let's just see where we're up to. So anyway, back to here's the setup. We've got Heather Langenkamp playing Heather Langenkamp, and then she is starting to have dreams around Freddy again. And then but then she kind of comes to the realization that the Freddy that she's starting to dream about isn't the Freddy that was from the Nightmare on Elm Street films. It is something a bit darker. And then Dylan, her son, starts to have kind of these episodes, and at first they think it's something to do with the earthquakes, but then we kind of get to hear more of Dylan's side of the story. So Dylan has but yeah, essentially, and then from that we've got Dylan, who is Nancy's son, and he is starting to be kind of troubled and nearly kind of like obsessed with the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and kind of everyone around her is saying that it's her fault for partaking in horror movies, and they're essentially kind of like mum shaming her for being in horror. And again, I think that is Wes Craven's way of kind of answering his critics, and kind of just letting people know that like kids do love horror movies, and horror isn't a bad thing, and horror movies don't create like serial killers and stuff like that. And we see this again in Scream. So I think like Wes Craven's New Nightmare is, again, it's him answering his critics and kind of but doing it in such a clever way. And so we have this absolutely amazing scene of Heather, who is doing an interview on TV, and in front of her there is an audience full of kids dressed as Freddy Krueger. And, she has a great line as well where the nurse is kind of obviously judging her because she's like, "Oh, you've not let your kids see one of your films, have you?" And, she says, like, Freddy is like Santa Claus or King Kong. Like, Freddy is this pop culture icon now. And kind of, I don't know, it feels to me like it's Wes Craven's way of saying, like, just critiquing it and even saying, like, is it right that this child murderer is now an icon of, even children? And, he is it within his own right, like, he has become like Santa Claus. Like, you don't even need to have seen a Nightmare on Elm Street to know who Freddy Krueger is. And, that's not necessarily Wes Craven's fault or Robert Englund's fault. It's just, as a society, horror has become so easily accessible. And even back then, this is Wes Craven saying that. Like, look how accessible horror has become. I mean, Freddy Krueger was on everything. He was on bed sheets. He was on, like, kids' pajamas, for God's sake. And this is someone that is based off like Freddy Krueger before in the remake where he's a paedophile and things. He is like a child murderer. Like he's known for murdering kids. And New Line Cinema, obviously licensed this merchandising thing, and Freddy Krueger is on absolutely everything. Even today, like the Freddy Krueger merch is still on everything. So I don't know if this was Wes Craven's kind of way of saying like, hey, we can't really be blaming Heather Langenkamp for starring in a horror film when Freddy Krueger's become this pop culture icon as a result of the films. I mean, he has become so far removed from what he is in the first one. In the original Nightmare on Elm Street, he is that kind of dirty, creepy man. But by Nightmare on Elm Street 4, he's wearing sunglasses, he's cracking jokes. He is that MTV Freddy, and he becomes like, Batman and Superman. Like, he is just that friend. He's like a children's entertainer at that point. So I think this film really does hold accountability and does talk about that in the sense of, Heather Langenkamp is all women in the genre are scrutinized for, being in horror, but it's not Heather's fault that Freddy's become like such an icon. I don't know. I don't know if I've just rambled about that, but I know that's kind of what I read from this film. So anyway, we have Heather Langenkamp in this film, and she is the coming. So with all of that being said, I think this was where Wes Craven decided to make Freddy that nasty old man again. And we do really see this with Dylan's portrayal and with how Dylan reacts to Freddy Krueger. Dylan doesn't see Freddy as this icon. He doesn't want Robert Englund's like autograph and things like that. We see that Dylan is genuinely afraid of Freddy Krueger, and I think that is what Wes Craven wanted to do as a result of all of this MTV Freddy crap. And it's just kind of the stuff that Dylan says. I think one of the quotes is, "Oh, the mean old man with the claws," and it's just a lot different. He doesn't explicitly say it's Freddy. He says it's the mean old man with the claws, and the way that Robert Englund is with Dylan, it really does instill that fear back again, and you can kind of tell that this is a different Freddy than what we already have. Now, I personally, the design of Freddy in this film, I honestly am not a massive fan of. I think that the big, like, gothic boots and the cape and the lined coat, I just think that was a bit of a decision. I mean, they were obviously trying to differentiate Freddy and the Freddy from the films because it's like a dark entity of Freddy Krueger. However, I think they should have gone back to Elm Street 1 and had kind of a very similar, like, old, dirty, gross Freddy rather than this kind of like high fashion camp metal glove Freddy. But obviously you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to make Freddy scary again, and it does work. I think Freddy is a lot darker in this film, and he is a lot scarier. But I think that's just because they've gone that extra mile to kind of sever ties with that MTV Freddy. And yeah, I do think it does work very, very well. Now, he is essentially an entity that's now coming up into our world, and I think the strongest and the best scene we have from this film is the scene where it's all like a nice blue hue, and Freddy comes up through into the world, and Nancy is in her bedroom and she hears something in the wardrobe. And I rewatched this film last night and it scared the shit out of me. It makes me jump every time, and I don't know why. Anyway, she kind of goes to the wardrobe and Freddy says, "Miss me," and he dives out of the wardrobe and they have a fight just like from the original, but it's not done cheap and it's not done like fan service. It's just like Nancy versus Freddy again. And it's so badass. She smashed him over the head with a coffee pot, and then he dives onto the bed with her. But before anything else, he goes, and then he's like, "Nancy." And it's just such a powerful scene of this entity, and you can kind of really see where this film is going. And, it's like Freddy isn't self-aware. Freddy is, he's still that Freddy from the films coming out into the real world. So he sees Heather Langenkamp, but he doesn't know that's Heather Langenkamp. He thinks that is Nancy Thompson, which is just so cool. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And then it kind of, it deepens that when we have the scene towards the end of the film where Nancy and Heather Langenkamp and John Saxon are talking outside, and she's like, "John, why are you calling me Nancy?" And she's like, "Why are you calling me John?" And he's like, "Get some sleep." And she says, "Okay, Daddy." And then she turns around, and it's like that she's accepted that she'll play Nancy one last time, and she's in her pajamas, and it's a 4028 Elm Street is her house, and she just goes inside like Nancy Thompson. Oh my god, it's so brilliant. Like that is how you do a fucking legacy sequel. Oh, Wes Craven, your mind. It's so fucking brilliant. It's so fucking brilliant. And then we also have, obviously, we have Wes Craven in this film as well. Wes Craven playing Wes Craven. And there's such a fantastic scene with Wes Craven and Heather Langenkamp where they are discussing this genie in a bowl type situation. And, Heather's kind of like, this is more than a script now. Like, did you know that Freddy was real and all this stuff? And they have like a dialogue that's like, you need to make a decision whether you're willing to play Nancy one last time. And then it cuts to Wes's screenplay on a screen, and the script is playing out as they're saying it, and then it says like fade to black, and it fades to black. It's so meta, it's so crazy, and it's done so well. And I just think like Wes Craven's mind, honestly, rest in peace, Wes Craven. I literally was watching this film and was thinking, like, imagine what other films we'd have had if Wes Craven hadn't sadly passed. Imagine what he would be thinking of the genre that we're in now. Like, what would Wes Craven do? What would he have done with the Scream franchise? What would he have done with Scream 5? It would have been a completely different film. And it's so crazy to think that it's kind of like a domino effect, because if Wes Craven's New Nightmare hadn't happened, would he have teamed up with Kevin Williamson, and would they have even made Scream? Because yes, Wes Craven didn't create Scream, but he did direct Scream, and he had a lot of stuff to do with Scream behind the scenes and with Kevin Williamson. So, it is very crazy to think that if he hadn't have been so meta, they probably would have maybe even gone with a different director for Scream, and maybe Scream would have been like a straight to video, one film only type thing. Whereas now it's, an entire franchise, and there's Scream 7 coming out and Scream 8. I mean, 8, it's nearly got the same amount of films as A Nightmare on Elm Street does now, which is so crazy to think. Especially because in A Nightmare on Elm Street, in Scream, where Drew Barrymore says, like, "Oh, I love A Nightmare on Elm Street, but just the first one because the rest suck," and now there's nearly 8 Scream movies, and I think what would Wes Craven have done with that as well is that there is no title card for this film, because this film isn't a film, it is real life. So there isn't a big grand, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and then like we begin the film. The film doesn't have a title sequence, and also when the credits finally roll and we do get a title score, Freddy Krueger plays Freddy Krueger, and Robert Englund plays Robert Englund, and Heather Langenkamp plays Heather Langenkamp. So Freddy Krueger is credited as Freddy Krueger in this film, which is so fantastic. But with that, I think we were robbed a standoff between Freddy and Robert Englund. Like, I would have loved a scene where Freddy tries to kill Robert Englund. I think that would have been so fantastic, and it's a shame that we didn't get that. Because we got a scene with Julie in the hospital where she is kind of given the Tina kill of the franchise. But I think it should have, instead of that kill, I think I'd have loved maybe Heather leaves Dylan with Robert Englund, and then Freddy comes and there's like a standoff. I think that would have been absolutely fantastic. However, that's not what happened in the end. But I would have absolutely loved a Robert Englund and Freddy face to face, because we kind of get an inkling that Robert Englund is struggling with this darker version of Freddy. He has a Freddy Krueger painting that he's done, and then Heather tries to reach him, and it kind of says that he's now out of town and things like that. So there is kind of rumblings on it, but we just don't get that fleshed out enough, which I think is probably kind of the more upsetting thing of this film. But that being said, I think with the themes that it deals with, it does such a fucking phenomenal job. A really, really, really phenomenal job. And like I said, this film, it deals with things like, motherhood and trauma and like generational trauma. And it does all in such a way that it's not, ramming it down your throat of like, these are the themes of this film. They're just kind of below the surface. And yeah. I just think this film is absolutely solid. I think it is one of the best Nightmare on Elm Street films, if not my favourite one of them all. And I think that's just a credit to, Heather Langenkamp especially. It must have been so hard for her to have to be in this film and play herself, but also play herself playing Nancy. But then also it's her real life on screen, it's, dealing with stuff like her stalker and things like that, which is actually part of the script. It must have been really struggling for her. I mean, as well, I think I remember reading somewhere that she did struggle on the set, especially towards the end of the film, where she has to kind of deal with lots of like phallic imagery, especially this film was quite strong in that, which it's not great, is it? If you're like on a set full of men and you've got this like massive phallic tongue wrapping itself around you, it's not great. So, all I can do is, I just really feel for her. And I mean, she's such an incredible actress. And I mean, like, props to her for coming back and, like doing this, not just for herself, but for the fans. But it's just a shame that, that kind of stuff has to happen. But hopefully, when she does come back for another Nightmare on Elm Street film, which she is going to, I'm manifesting it, she'll have an absolute fucking blast doing it with Robert Englund, because that's what's going to happen. I'm telling you now, that is what's going to happen. That's all we've got time for today on the Don't Press Play podcast. I'm going to wrap this up now because I've been rambling on for about 20 odd minutes now. If you haven't checked out this film, I highly suggest you do. It's such a fantastic film. And yeah, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this rundown of A Nightmare on Elm Street New Nightmare. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Bye.